I want to give you my first impressions of this brand new Canson paper. This is the Mi-Teintes Velvet paper. I bought a 12-sheet pad in the cream white color, but it does come in 14 different beautiful colors. If you go to Dakota Pastels right now, it's currently unavailable, but they expect to have the paper this month, so that's good news. I was told by one of my students that it was available on artmiranda.com. So I went there, purchased this pad, and that's what I'll be testing on today, just to give you some of my first impressions. This paper was designed for the pastel artist. That's what they had in mind. But as you may already know, we as color pencil artists and mixed media artists, we often adapt pastel papers for our own techniques. And this one does seem to be quite promising. It's rumored to be sort of a direct competitor to Clairefontaine's PASTELMAT, which has been a longtime favorite among many colored pencil and mixed media artists. But as you may also know, there's been some quality concerns and some consistency in the surface of the PASTELMAT paper. I still love the paper. I still like to use it. I adapt my techniques for whatever particular paper surface that I'm working on. And so if it's slightly more textured this time when I'm working on pastel mat, I just adapt my techniques for that situation. But I do understand wanting a paper to be consistent every time you use it. Now, the first thing that I noticed is that it is very smooth when you feel it. When you rub your hand over it, it has a very smooth feel to it. And when I started using my dark indigo in polychromos on the surface, it felt quite good. Just creating this gradient kind of felt like pastel mat, to be honest. So I was encouraged and I went on to use my Caput Mortem, and I'm doing the same thing, just creating a gradient here. And now I'm using a luminance pencil, and again, it feels quite, I hate to say it, but it feels velvety. It's quite nice to use. The paper itself is sort of pliable. It's sort of bendable. I don't know how else to explain that. It's quite nice. I'm using my eraser here. I used the Vanish Erase just to show how it erases, and it did really well. And now I'm using a luminance pencil, the dark indigo, which is nearly black, using the Kneaded Eraser to show just how easily it takes off some of the pigment on the paper. And now I'm using a Princeton Select #2 Fix-It brush and just blending that together, dry brush blending. Tried a soft watercolor type of brush, and that really didn't do much. I even tried that later on with a polychromos gradient, and it just didn't do a whole lot. Now I'm testing out a white pencil just to see how well it's going to make a mark over on top of a dark area. Did not perform real well, and to be honest, that's sort of difficult to do even on pastel mat. So using my Derwent drawing pencil, now I've got my white Pablo pencil, which seems to perform better typically on pastel mat and on sanded papers when you're trying to apply light over dark. And this did fairly well, marginally well, did about the same as what pastel mat does. Going to try a little bit of solvent here just to test and see how well the paper will take it. And it performed very similar to what we would expect with pastel mat and with sanded papers. It does not have enough on the surface to really mix that. So instead of mixing the pigment with layers of the pencil pigment itself, all it really does at this point is it pushes it down into the tooth and sort of spreads it out. But I thought it might give you an idea of what this textured surface sort of looks like. Now, on the other hand, when I applied this to the luminance application, the waxy buildup of the luminance pencil actually performed really well with the solvent, and I have no doubt that the polychromos would perform really well had I put more on the surface to begin with. But you'll notice just this dark indigo became very saturated and it filled in all of the tooth on the paper, which was very, very satisfying. Applying the solvent now to the Chinese white and Derwent drawing over here next to this dark indigo patch. And this did quite well also. I'm going to use my ultramarine violet in luminance and apply that as a secondary color over on the bottom side of this test swatch. And you may notice just how rich and creamy this is becoming, and you'll see a little bit of dust there. And that's just from this ultramarine violet just flaking off just a little bit because I'm pressing pretty hard. And it performed really, really well using a burnt sienna 50% going over this polychromos pencil layer. And now I'm going to use my Chrysocolla blue on top of my dark indigo layer. And you might notice that where you've got, and I'm using a purple now on the other side, but now we've got 3 to 4 layers all in one spot, right? And you might notice just how well it is saturating this paper. So I was quite pleased with that. I want to show you a little bit about the texture of the overall paper, try to indent the paper just a little bit. Even though I felt like I was making creases in the paper, the paper laid down quite nicely, and I think that those dents in the paper would likely disappear after I've got all of my pencil layers on top. All right, I want to zoom in just a little bit here to show you some of the texture of the tooth when you use the side of the pencil. I think you can sort of see just how nice and random this tooth is. And then you might also notice just how well lines go down using a Pablo pencil now. And it becomes very saturated very quickly just by going over, using tracking is what I like to call it, going over and restating some lines in the same spot. We've got this very nice mass of pigment, and you'll notice that it's keeping the tip quite nicely as well. So using a vermilion pencil, and I want to show you some of the same things that we were just doing. Sometimes it helps just to see it in a different color. Now, I hope you're enjoying this. And before I go, I just want to say that some of the questions I've been getting is, John, are you going to try this new Canson Mi-Teintes velvet paper? So yes, I am going to try it. I am trying it. I'm kind of excited about it. And the other questions are, John, are you replacing PastelMat now with the Canson Mi-Teintes velvet? The answer to that is no, probably not. Probably not a replacement, but it's definitely a great addition to my paper collection. And I'm excited about what Canson has put out there in the marketplace. I think competition is always healthy. And I think this paper deserves a spot in any colored pencil artist selection of papers. So if you've not tried it yet, I think this is a real solid effort by Canson to fill something that is needed. We need more quality papers. So let me know in the comments below if you've tried the paper and if you like the paper. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Take care and stay sharp.